Hey, welcome back to my channel. As you see from the title that I've given this video, I'm going to speak on breastfeeding. My daughter is now 7 months and will be 8 months by the end of this month. I have a few tips that I feel may help another mother as far as breastfeeding. There were some things that I learned along a little breastfeeding journey that I think would have been beneficial to have known from the start. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, the first tip that I want to mention, or I want to put out there, is to moisturize your nipples. This is a big one. When your nipples are not moisturized, I feel that you experience a little more pain from the actual sucking much from when your baby latches on. Something that helped me, if I can find it out and start a picture of it, but I bought some boob paste, I think is what it was, from out of Target, and it's organic. It's made of like olive oil and a couple other things, but it worked wonders. I had started out, I used at least a good 2 or 3 of them jars within maybe a month's time frame, and a little goes a long way. It isn't like you need a whole lot of it to slather on, but a little goes a long way, and it was wonderful. It did its job. I think some of the pain that's associated with breastfeeding comes from my nipples not being moisturized, because I promise you, once I started moisturizing my nipples, it was a breeze to get through each feeding session. And to make sure that I was well moisturized come the next feeding, when I would go into the restroom to use the restroom or do whatever, I would put a little bit on my nipples at a time. Do not wait until right at feeding time to do it, because then I feel like it's not necessarily doing its job. When they are already like moist and moisturized beforehand, you will notice a huge difference in the that feeding or whatever. My next tip is to breastfeed on each side. This to me was important because, number one, you don't want your boobs lopsided. Not saying that you can tell in every shirt. Some people can tell, some people can't. But to me, it was helpful to know, because if you feed on one side, I feel like you'll notice that you're draining one side faster than what the other side is. And if you're constantly staying on one side, if your baby's feeding out that side, I felt like after feeding her, let's say, on the right side, once I fed her on that side, wait a little bit, and then I go back to feed her on that side, I feel like the milk wasn't plentiful, I guess you would say, compared to when I switched her from side to side. Then I knew, she was getting enough at each feeding. Let's see. Something else that was helpful: when your supply starts to go down, use a heating pad. A heating pad does wonders. What I did a couple times, not only did I use the heating pad, I also took like a hot rag, and I would literally put it on the boob that I'm going to feed off of. I will put it on that, and it made it flow so much easier. And I know it made a difference in how it flowed out when it came time for me to pump. That was a big thing too. It made a big difference when it came time for me to pump. Let me see. My next tip is, do not keep milk longer than 4 days. I had seen it on a couple websites, and that was pretty helpful, because it kind of gave me an idea of how long to hold on to it or whatever. Because you can freeze breast milk. I've frozen breast milk before. I personally prefer not to freeze it. That's one of the things, kind of a preference thing. If you choose to do it, great. If you don't, it's not a bad thing. It's just I choose not to freeze it because I choose not to freeze it because I have read that when you freeze it and then you thaw it out, it loses some of its nutritional value. And I mean, like I said, I've done it before. There's no harm in doing it. There are plenty of people that actually that may actually freeze breast milk, or especially if they have like a high supply of milk. I'm not gonna lie to you, my supply is not its highest. I think that's mainly because when I'm not around my baby, I do not pump as much as I should, especially when I'm at work. And that's a big thing. That's something else. Pump as often as you feed your baby when you're around him or her. That is how often you should be pumping when you're not around them. So like for instance, when I go to work, when I'm at home, scratch that. When I'm at home, I feed my baby every 2.5 to 3 hours. Sometimes every 2, but for the most part, anywhere from every 2 to 3 hours. When I get to work, 4 hours may go by before I pump. And that's just more so because I may not have the time to step away like I would want to. Sometimes having to go and be in a meeting, and then after the meeting, I may have another meeting, or just things to where I may need to go help people out at work or whatever. So that's a big thing. Pump as much as you're around your child, as much as you feed your child when you're face to face with them. Do pump during that same amount of time when you're at work or you're away from your family, if that makes sense. Let me see, what other tips did I have up here? Let me see. Oh, something, okay, another tip. No, I don't know. This may not necessarily be a tip, but I know for me, when I breastfeed, or just a lot of times went by in general, I try not to lay on my chest. I try not to lay on my chest. I try not to wear like tight clothing or like a tight sports bra or anything. Just personal preference. Again, kind of stay away from that. And then, oh, use cooling pads. If by chance you do experience some type of pain with breastfeeding, use the nipple cooling pads. Those were really, really good as well first starting out. I think first time I used those, I think I was actually in the hospital. I think it was like a day or two after I had her. And like I said, with the pain that I had, the little, crusting over or whatever, I put one of them bad boys on my nipples and let it sit there for a while, and it was the best feeling ever. It eased a lot of the pain. So although, like I said, this was before I got into using like the paste that I was using for my nipples, prior to that, I would put a cooling pad up there, and it helps a whole lot. And then I think that's it. That's all I have right now. Those are just a few of the tips that I thought I would share. If I can think of anything else that may come to mind that has been beneficial for me since I had my daughter, and like during this whole time I started breastfeeding, then I'll be sure to do an update or an edit to this, or whatever the case may be. But right now, that's all I have. The biggest thing is moisturize your nipples. You moisturize your nipples, I promise you, you will notice the difference of feeding, and that will just kind of make everything else fall into place. You will not dread having to feed or anything like that. It'll just be as simple, oh, it's time for my baby to eat. Let me go ahead and feed him or her. It's not gonna be a drawn out process, or the first few sucks are not gonna be painful. You're not gonna be like, oh my god, I can't wait till this is over with. Trust me. It will be pretty smooth. And that's it. So for this video, I will say we are done. So with that being said, I'll see y'all in my next one. Bye.